It's an example of a tree plantation, and it started to regenerate. So we're seeing more herbaceous species, more deciduous species, and because it's originally a conifer plantation, you can still see the rows of conifers. It looks like Scots pine were planted in rows, and then it's probably been thinned to allow more species to come up to germinate, and you'll see small trees, and so it's a little more mixed now, and you have a ground cover of poison ivy. So here I am out on the property. This is the 40 hectares in the Yucatán, and you can see the site is fairly dry right now. We're in the dry season, but even this whole area here is very dry normally. And when we removed the cows, we'd put up fencing to keep the neighbors' cows out of this area. Most of the vegetation that remained has thorns, so you can see here there's a lot of thorns on these different bushes. We even have it's very dry, so we have things like cactus, and most of these bushes in this area of the property, this is the front half of the property, which we haven't done a lot of active restoration on, and so whatever's here is basically what's regrown, and the species that have regrown are the species that can tolerate being browsed by deer, or sorry, are the species that can then tolerate being browsed by cows. So they're not browsed by cows because they have all these thorns. And here you can see another species. So this is an early pioneer tree that's grown up, and because the cows had wiped out most of the vegetation and only the species that are spiny, and you can still see the spines sticking out on it, this early pioneer species has grown up very rapidly, but it only lasts about 10 years, and you can see it's already starting to die back. And so a lot of this area, the primary species have died back, but there's not a second growth coming up of the later successional species. So in this area, we've got very few of the native species left in this area that are later successional. This one is also a primary colonizer. It's a nitrogen fixer, but it again has large spines. And so this is one of the native trees that will grow. It's a later successional species, but there's very few of these within this area that are remaining. And on the ground, you can see what happens when we release. You know, there's a lot of rocks in the soil, and it has very fast drainage. And we have a buildup now. There's a lot of organic matter on the ground. So what's happening is part of the natural regeneration here. So it's partially recovered, but it can't really go much further because there's not the seed bank here, and the cows have wiped out all the young seedlings. So what's happening is it's all turning into grassland right now. So some of the trees are mostly shrubby trees in this area, and we're allowing the natural regeneration to occur in this area because we're focusing on the back half. But you can see most of the organic matter is on the ground is grass, and slowly that will build up over time, and we're allowing that process to happen naturally on the front of the property. And when we have more time, we'll come in here and we'll plant back in a lot of the native species, and hopefully with this organic matter starting to build up on the ground, then it'll be a richer soil by the time we come in and start planting the trees. So in the back half of the property that we've been more actively restoring, the cows have been out of this area for a much longer period of time, and we've actually come in and we've started to plant some different trees. In the background you can see one of the sacred Mayan trees, a peach or a guanacaste, and it's one of the few remaining trees that we have here that's actually large. Most of the forest in this area would have been large trees like that originally, but then it was cut for cow agriculture, and a lot of times the loggers will approach the farmers and say, oh, I'll take all your wood and give you a certain amount of money, and the farmers are quite happy. Oh yeah, I get a little bit of money to clear the forest, and then I can put cows on it. And so that's what's happened in this area. But you can see that it's much cooler here, and it's darker as well. It's not as exposed, and the ground cover is a mixture of different herbaceous species, and there's a lot less grass in this area. So the canopy has started to close over, and we've got more diversity of species starting to come in. And although it's not completely closed in, you can see that the ground is fairly shaded now, and that we've got a fair bit of leaf material on the ground. This used to be all bare and red, but now we've got more organic matter, and we're starting to armor the soil. And so we're protecting the soil and allowing the microbiome to grow, and it's producing more organic matter inside the soil. And you can see, looking across, we've got multiple stories here. We've got our ground cover species, and then we have our small shrubs, and then we have our intermediate sized trees, and then we have some of our taller trees. Eventually we'll have more taller trees, but it's in the process of recovery, and we just have to protect that. And you can hear the difference. There's different species that are occurring back here, the different birds, different wildlife. They prefer to live in the back half of the property where there's more diversity of species versus the front half, which was hot and dry. This is much cooler, much moister, and it's much more shady, so it's a nicer place to live. And of course we put a number of different wildlife ponds and different spots around here to attract more of the wildlife. And you can just see as we're moving along here, it's gradually starting to build up some woody debris as well. I mean, most of the woody debris gets broken down fairly quickly. We have termites, we have ants, and we have all sorts of different fungi. But just having that buildup of different organic matter and creating these different habitats, so you know, a rabbit can hide in there, mice can hide. So just creating different habitats allows for more species to occur in these different areas. And it just gives you a bit of an idea of what we're trying to do back here. You know, initiating the natural recovery, first protecting it from the cows, and then adding some new species into these areas, maybe taking care of some of the trees, like we watered some of these trees, we put in biochar, we put in soil amendments, microbiome enhancement, to get these species up to a certain stage before so that they can grow up to a stage where they can be free, and we don't have to take care of them anymore. So that's what's happening in this back area, and it's really starting to turn the corner and really looking a lot better now. And you can see under here, if we look, you know, it's got organic matter on the soil now, and the soil is starting to become more brown. It's in the dry season right now, so even now it's not quite as lush as it could be. And you can see here there's all sorts of little antlion holes, and you can see the rock. So it's very thin soil over this limestone rock here. So I just wanted to show you this amate tree. So this is one of the sacred trees of the Mayan people, because it's a connection between heaven, and you can see all the leaves and the branches that it's got, and then it's also connecting deep into the earth. So it's connecting heaven and earth and connecting into the underworld, because the roots go deep into the soil, into the rock, and they go into the cenote water and the groundwater level, which is about 7 meters down here. So Sophie will show you a picture of that in a second. But I just wanted to show you, you see how much biomass is on the ground. When you have a big tree like this, it's just constantly raining down this biomass and feeding the soil. And you can see down here, this is one of the buttresses, so it has long branches going out, and so it sends down these roots, and the roots attached to the ground, and it's holding up the tree. But on the ground here you can see just how much organic matter is here. Like, look at that in just one handful. And then the soil, I don't want to disturb it too much, but you can see it, even though it's really dry, it's nice and brown. So this is what we want to occur in the rest of this forest, is get these trees up to a bigger size so that it's creating this rain of organic matter constantly and creating this brown soil. Let me cover that back up. Maybe make a disturbance. You want to repair what you've done. And you can see it's very rocky here, and so a lot of the roots are just running right across the surface. But it's still holding on, and it's still growing, and even in the dry season this tree is still very green because it can find its own water going deep into the cenote, and it's able to take water from the groundwater that way. And the amate tree is actually an indicator species for cenotes. If you know, if there's a cenote there, then you'll have an amate tree. So let's just take a look how the roots go down into the cenote. And over here you can see all the roots climbing all over the rocks. And that was just a toe flying up from the cenote. Oh, another one. And so here you can see the cenote, and on the far side we actually have another amate tree. So we have a pair of large amate trees, and you can see the root system that goes from the tree past the rocks and down, actually hanging down into the cenote. And so it can get its own water even in the middle of the dry season. And this tree produces a ton of fruit. It's in the fig species, it's a ficus, and it produces a tiny little fruit which is very plain tasting, but for the birds it's a huge source of food, especially in the dry season when there's not a lot of other food. So it's kind of sustaining this whole system around the cenote. And if you're here, you can feel that the air is cooler and moister near the cenote, and underneath the amate trees it's all got all this organic matter and wildlife. So this is one of the reasons that we created all our wildlife ponds, is because we knew the wildlife had a hard time going down to get that water, so we made their life a little bit easier. And it also makes it easier to monitor the different species as well. They come right up to the house looking for water.